What's to say that you can't live life in a totally imaginative, fantastical way where you are not a factual person? If you think about it for a moment, like really open your mind, try to imagine what it would be like to live life in a non-scientific manner, in a non-factual manner where you didn't care about the facts. You didn't care about being rigorous. In fact, you lived your life in such a way where you leaned into and you embraced the fantasy, the illusions, the hallucinations, the wishful thinking, the woo-woo stuff, the magical thinking. You actually enjoyed this stuff, and you knew it was magical, but you played into it anyways, almost like you're an actor on stage in a Shakespearean play. You know you're not really Hamlet. You're just playing Hamlet for a little while here while you're alive. And so you're going to be playing up and you're going to be fantastical and you're going to be buying into all this new agey stuff. And it's okay that it's not scientific or that it's even real or factual. It doesn't matter. You just enjoy it and that's how you want to live your life. See, if you tell this to most Sam Harris types, they are going to shit their pants in horror. To them, this is their worst nightmare. But actually, it's just a different mode of living. And there's no one to say that this mode that I described is any worse than the scientific mode. Now, see, a Sam Harris type here would come in and say, oh, Leo, but, there is an important difference because, the factual people, we make all the technology and we land a man on the moon, whereas the hippie, magical thinking people, the Deepak Chopra people, all they do is just talk about stuff and they don't do anything and whatever. And they have sex and they smoke weed and they get into cults and they brainwash each other. So what? That's your bias. Landing a man on the moon, having technology, that's your nerd fucking bias. Recognize you're a fucking nerd, you're addicted to it, and that you're stuck on that frame of living. That is not necessarily the best way to live. But here's the real kicker, and this is what's really going to sting someone like a Sam Harris type, is that the Sam Harris type is going to want to retreat here. He's going to want to do sort of a very sneaky maneuver. He's going to want to try to retreat into truthfulness and say, Leo, yeah, okay, fine, maybe you're right. People can live however they want. But in the end, we value truth. And science is just more truthful. And this nerd way of living is just a more truthful. I have a left brain way of living, but that's more truthful than the more artistic, romantic way of living. And in fact, all that romantic stuff, that's all bullshit, that's falsehood, and that this science and rationality, this is the actual truth. This is the objective truth. But that's a lie. That is not objective truth. Because by definition, consciousness is infinite. Therefore, consciousness includes within itself both the rational and the irrational, both the left brain nerdy and the right brain artistic and creative and the mystical and the schmystical and the new agey and even the fantastical, even lies and stories, even pure fantasies of imagination, flights of fancy, poetry, all of this sort of stuff is as real. It's as much a part of consciousness as is the logical, factual stuff. And this is what the scientific mind cannot fathom, fundamentally. They're in denial about this. So I'm not saying that Santa Claus is real in the sense that you can go to the North Pole and knock on his door and talk to Santa Claus. What I'm saying is that Santa Claus is a feature of infinite consciousness. Not as a guy in the North Pole, as a physical guy. Santa Claus exists as an idea, as a fantastical archetype, as an abstraction, as a fantasy, as an illusion. Not in the physical realm. And who is to say that the abstract realm is any lower than or less important than or inferior to the physical material realm? See, that is a bias within the scientific mind. But it gets worse than that, because you, as a scientist, might say, well, who cares? Fine, Leo, who cares about that? I'm just going to do my science and be very factual, and I'm going to develop my theory of everything, and I'm going to understand all of reality, while you guys, stay there and play around with your elves and fucking Santa Claus and all this sorts of shit. The flying spaghetti monster. While you're doing that, I'm going to do some sort of Newton shit here and figure out everything. Figure out the truth. But here's where it's really going to sting, is that you will never figure out the truth, because the truth includes everything, and you, by definition, have cut yourself off from half of reality by your method. You have a methodological bias, and you're not aware of this bias, and you're not aware of how deep this runs and how it disconnects you from reality. And furthermore, it disconnects you from love. See, you're not able to love half the world, or even more, because more than half the world are not nerds like you. They're not factual. They're not objective people. They're not rigorous people. They are fantastical people. They are artistic people. They are sloppy thinking type of people. They are religious fundamentalists. They are New Agers. They are woo-woo types. They are mystics, and so forth. And you can't love those people in the same way that, for example, Richard Dawkins cannot love that. He cannot love that aspect of infinite mind, because he's in opposition to it, fighting it, because that's his shadow. He's demonized it. And because of this, Richard Dawkins, I'm not just saying that he's going to have a bad life. I'm not just going to say he's going to be miserable. I'm not just saying that he's going to be depressed. I'm not just saying that what I'm saying is that he will not understand what reality is. He will not understand what consciousness is, and he will not access the highest ultimate truth, and he will actually corrupt and distort science itself. So it ends up boomeranging. Like I said, every bias boomerangs, and here's the boomerang. Now it hits him in the back of the head. So what happens is that actually science itself is now corrupt, because materialist science is literally unable to make sense of what consciousness is as a result of this sort of methodological bias. It's unable to make sense of UFOs, unable to make sense of paranormal phenomena, unable to make sense of telepathy, of mystical experiences, healing, enlightenment, awakening, psychedelics, and many, many, many other things. In fact, the majority of the universe is not able to make sense of. So ironically, the bias, the rationalist, scientific, skeptical bias that a scientific mind has, it has that bias and justifies that bias out of with the justification that it's a love of truth and a love of science, and you're protecting science as you would protect your little child, in a selfish, fear-based, attached way. That mind is attached to the biases of science, the methodological biases of science, and therefore it's unable to let that science grow and flower into incorporating more of consciousness. And just like with your little child in the previous examples, this bias ends up backfiring and undermining the very spirit of science. The spirit of science is to understand everything. But you can't understand everything when your method is so biased that it excludes the majority of reality from its investigations.